Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today for the Arc Server forum. We know we had a little bit of a hiatus, so a little bit over a month, but we have double the updates almost to share with you because of that. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to just start off with a couple of quick announcements and updates related to the Arc Server, the connected machine agent. Then I'm going to hand it over to Gail, who's going to share how you can get involved with all of the exciting research opportunities we have from our UX perspective in research where we're engaging with customers. So we have a lot of opportunities, whether it's our Copilot, new offerings in server management, etc., where you can get involved. And so Gail will share how you can sign up for some of those studies. I'll hand it off to Megan, who will then talk a little bit about some new multi-cloud capabilities, specifically multi-cloud onboarding. And then we'll hand it to Lance and Nikita, who will give us the latest and greatest from the SQL Server side, including some of their performance dashboarding capabilities and demoing that for you. And finally, we have some special guests, and I know it's quite late for them, so we really appreciate them dialing in, Swathi and Gurkrit, who are going to share with you the latest about change tracking inventory and update manager. So you're going to have chance to ask them questions and see kind of the vision around that, how that works with Arc, etc. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into it. So some of the quick updates from the server side with our latest March and April connected machine agent versions 1.39 and 1.40. You're going to continue to see a lot of extension quality improvements where we're having some extension installation and removal checks as well. And that includes with commands run locally on the machine, where we're improving some of the extension reliability logic. You're also noticing that we now have the ability to customize the CPU limit with the extension manager and machine config policy evaluation engine. And so this helps provide a lot of flexibility for some of those smaller or underpowered VMs as well, where there might be some resource footprint limitations impacting you. One quick interesting note is next month's Arc Server monthly forum, we're actually going to do some troubleshooting guidance as well with extension quality. Another important note here is extended security updates. We've actually worked with Windows Servicing Delivery, so now Windows Server 2012 ESUs no longer require opening up those endpoints for the downloads of the intermediate certs. So we have a workaround for that. I know that's been a blocker for a lot of customers. We got feedback on that. So we're excited to announce that requirement is now waived. And we're going to document this more clearly with announcement as well and blog. Final quick note is Oracle Linux 9, new supported distro. If there are additional distros that you're looking for support for, please let us know from the product group. We really want to know if there's specific distros that you're interested in having server support for and want us to prioritize. And final quick update is Run Command, still in public preview and a lot of improvements in terms of reliability, usability. You're going to constantly see more documentation with the CLI. Here, reliability improvements with long running commands. And again, if you're interested in providing us feedback for the Run Command public preview, which is ongoing, you have that ak.ms Run Command public preview form link where you can log in to provide us with updates. So that's a quick wrap in terms of the latest from the Arc-enabled server land with the newest connected machine agent versions, and you can find our full release notes and documentation. Now I'll hand it over to Gail to speak to some opportunities to shape the future of Arc with our upcoming and current studies. All right, Gail.
Thank you, Arnold. Yeah. Beyond the wonderful all the product updates, we are also constantly looking for user feedback to help improve the experience, to make sure it's easy to use. And for this month, more specifically, we are looking for feedback about how can we help with using AI Copilot for troubleshooting in Azure Arc. So we are looking for your feedback in the upcoming study. It will be a short survey, and there will be opportunity to have also follow-up discussion with the Azure UX researcher, also product team as well. And beyond that specific study, we always have more feedback session coming up. So just for Azure or beyond across the Azure. So if you're interested in receiving information about upcoming future user study, one way to engage with us is to join the Azure Experience Insider. So you will receive newsletter about the upcoming study that if that align with your interest, feel free to sign up. That's it. And I also put the link into the chat. Thank you, Arnav.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Gail. And yeah, it'll be great if folks want to take a quick minute, as that's put in the chat, to go ahead and sign up. Awesome. With that, I'll hand it now over to Megan to share on the multi-cloud side.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Arnav. And sorry, I think I took over the screen share since I'm going to demo here soon. But thank you for having me. We have talked about multi-cloud with the Arc server community before, but just to give a quick reminder, we're building a way that we can actually connect non-Azure public cloud environments to Azure to give customers a better single control plane so they can centralize things like inventory and be able to leverage Azure management services through Azure Arc. And so right now we are in private preview for AWS, where we can actually make this connection to your AWS account, and we can agentless, without an agent, we can actually get inventory of your AWS account, so you can see all of this information in Azure for all of the resources you have deployed. And then if you would actually like to Arc-enable your EC2 instances, we can help do that for you at scale, so you no longer have to go and onboard the Arc agent one by one on each of your EC2 instances, but through this connection, we can actually help do that for you. With that, we are in private preview, so we support both AWS single and organizational accounts, and we do scan across the following AWS regions that are listed here. And then for the inventory product, we are scanning 35 different resource types inside of Azure or inside of AWS. And so this includes EC2 instances, but other things like RDS databases, storage accounts, Lambda functions, and beyond. All of this is documented in our private preview docs, which I'll post the link inside of the chat window. And then two, if you are interested in giving us feedback, or if you want support in helping to get onboarded, we would absolutely love to chat with you. So please fill out the survey, and we can actually talk as a product team with you to kind of help get you onboarded. And with that, we are looking to public preview in summer of 2024. And so we're trying to get as much feedback as we can before that to make sure that we're shipping a great product. But with that, I did want to just show you quickly, since we made some updates since I think the last time we chatted, around what's happening for multi-cloud. So I'm going to flip over here to my browser view. So this is the documentation that we'll paste in the chat window for the links. And so this actually goes through all of the different prerequisites, the supported regions, and then it also tells you how to get started with the portal. And this is basically what I want to walk through really quickly. So if I come over here to the Azure portal, this is under a special link that is in that documentation that has the multi-cloud experiences. So if I browse here over to the Azure Arc view, and then I click on management, here I can actually see there's a new entry here called connectors. And this is the multi-cloud connector for our offering. And so if I hit create here, this is where I can actually now come and create a connector. So I can select a resource group where I want to stick my connector into. I can name my connector something like Megan Test Connector. I can select the Azure region where I want my connector to reside. And then I can also put in my AWS account here. So I'm going to just hit here. I've got my AWS account information. So I'm going to come back to my portal and paste that account number in. After you set up your account number, this is where basically you can turn on those solutions. So as we talked about, there's the Arc onboarding, which allows, once again, our service to go and actually install the Arc agent on all of the discovered EC2 instances that we find. And we're also going to automatically do a periodic sync across your account. So if you've deployed new EC2 instances, we'll automatically pick them up and Arc-enable them if they fit the requirements for Arc-enablement. The next one is inventory. So once again, this allows you to have us be able to connect and represent your assets in Azure in more of a read-only form. So this doesn't require any type of agent to be on the machine. And also we support more than just EC2. Once again, storage accounts, Lambda functions, databases, and so on. After you select the solutions though that you're interested in, next is our authentication template, and this is what gives our first-party application access and federated to your AWS account. So for inventory, we need read access, and then for the Arc enablement, we need EC2 write access in order for our service to have access to install the Arc agent on your EC2 machines. And then after that, you just can apply some tags on your AWS connector if you want to, and then you can review and create. So once you review and create, all of this, your connector will now show up on that connectors blade. And what's really cool is you'll actually be able to start using Azure Resource Graph to start querying for your data against both Azure and AWS. So here I have a query that queries for functions across AWS and Azure. And so if I run this, it will actually show me for all of my functions. I can actually see which ones are Azure versus AWS, when were they last modified. So we're collecting all of the metadata for your resources on your source cloud, putting them into Azure as first-class resources, and then carrying over all of that metadata and putting it all into ARG, so you get a really nice experience to not only have a nice inventory tool, but then once again, for those EC2 instances, we also can onboard you to the Arc agent, so you can take advantage of monitoring, Defender, and so on through Azure Arc. And sorry, that was pretty quick. I know we're a little short on time this week, but if you've got any questions, please throw them in the chat for me, and I will get to them. Back to you, Arnav.
Awesome. This is amazing, Megan, and I think that it was really, really neat for everyone to see that live. Are there any questions folks have? I think people probably just are asking how to get started. I think we see, do you have training? How do I get started with this? So are there any kind of support for that? And I noticed there's a question about GCP support as well on this.
Awesome. Yes. So to get started, I'm actually going to throw the links in the chat window. So there's no access that's required. So as long as you you can access our GitHub account, and then in our GitHub account, you actually have the link to the portal, that special link that then gives you access to the connector. But there's no like signups that you have to do. So feel free to hit this link inside the chat window for our documentation and go ahead and get started. If you've got questions though, or just want help or want to give us feedback, please submit the form on the survey, and we would absolutely love to talk to you. Or if you just want us to kind of handhold and walk you through the process, we would absolutely love to have more one-on-one conversations with you. As for GCP support, this is definitely something on our roadmap. Right now, we're focused on AWS and getting that into a public preview state, making sure that things look good before we start expanding to other clouds, but GCP will be the next one that we look at. And always, too, feel free to email me. If you take a look at the documentation and you don't understand something, always feel free to send me an email. I will throw my email in the chat window as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. This is really, really awesome to see, and especially to see it live in action. With that, we're going to have Lance and Nikita up. Lance, Nikita, would you want me to screen share, or do you prefer to screen share on the SQL Server
Yeah, feel
side?
free to screen share, Arnav.
All right. Awesome. Everyone able to see?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Nikita Tuckrew. I'm a product manager in the Azure Arc-enabled data services team, and I'm really excited to be here today to go over the latest capabilities and features that we've released for Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server specifically. So let's go ahead and get started. I think, Arnav, if you go kind of one slide back, let's start with the March updates and then go into April. So I know we've been kind of going through a lot of these different pieces. So let's start with March. A couple of new capabilities that we've released is one is in terms of backup management. You can now schedule a backup at the instance or the database level. So if both the database and instance level backup schedule is set, then the database level schedule takes precedence over the instance level backup schedule. And then similarly, if you delete a database level backup schedule, the instance level backup schedule does apply. So do try out that capability. Some more updates for March as well is we've streamlined networking endpoints. So before this release, the Azure Arc data processing endpoint was at azurewebsites.net. Starting in March, part of this release is now we have solidified this into arcdataservices.com. And one thing to note is that this is for our SQL Server. It sends, our data processing service, our service telemetry, and our performance monitoring to Azure. And this does allow for TLS 1.3. So now moving forward as to what are the latest capabilities for this month as part of the April release. Lots of different exciting updates. One is you can actually now move your instances and databases to different subscriptions or resource groups. So this is now in public preview. This applies to your SQL Server instances and your databases. The way that you can go about doing this, if you want to try it out, is if you have an existing Arc server and you select that for moving the resource, we will automatically detect the Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server instances and databases along with that, and all of them will move together for you to your new desired location, whether that's a new subscription or a new resource group. So definitely do try that out. What we've also done is updated licensing and configuration support. So this comes in terms of a few different areas. One is with our physical core licensing, unlimited virtualization support, support for extended security updates, and we've also made database inventorying available now for all license types. So you can definitely utilize the database properties to learn about what you have on-prem, see it in Azure, and also even use Azure Resource Graph to query on that information and see it at scale. And then finally, we've updated the performance dashboards as well. So now we have a new built-in role and action that's available to manage access to the performance dashboard. And for the performance dashboard, if you haven't tried it out already, I would highly encourage you to check it out. Just go into the Azure portal in your Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server resource, and then go ahead and hit the monitoring section for performance dashboards, and you'll be able to see different telemetry and information about your CPU utilization, so on and so forth, and even create custom charts. So definitely do try that out. Now I wanted to go through one more update of what's coming soon. So if we kind of move on, I want to talk about least privileges a little bit in depth. So what is least privileges? So least privileges is, this information security principle, which says that accounts and applications should only have access to the data and operations that they should require. With Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server, you can actually run the agent extension service with least privileges. And what we're doing is we're making this automatically available to customers in the coming months. So you'll see support for this right away in the coming months. If you're on the February release or later, least privileges support will be automatically available to you. And what's happening behind the scenes, in case you're wondering, is once you configure this agent extension service to run with least privileges, which we'll be automatically doing for you, it's going to use the NT Service SQL Server Extension Service account. And this is just a local Windows service account that's created and managed by the Azure extension for SQL Server when you're in that least privileges mode. And what it's doing is really granting the minimum required permissions and privileges to run this extension on the Windows operating system. So it only has access to folders, directories used for reading and storing configuration or writing logs. I would highly encourage everyone to go ahead and, we have a lot of information on this in our documentation. It's currently in public preview in the Azure CLI, so you may have already enabled it. But the main update here is that it will be automatically enabled for you in the coming months. So definitely do check that out as well. And these are all of the updates that we have for Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server for what was new in March, April, and what's coming soon with least privileges. So definitely let me know if you have questions in the chat, and I'll also put my email if anyone has questions and I can answer those as well. But yeah, thanks so much, and back to you, Arnav.
Awesome. And quick question, was there anything you wanted to demo real quick in terms of the SQL Server performance dashboard? If you could just pull that up real quick for folks to see.
Yeah, I can show the performance dashboard. Let me pull it out really quickly. But yeah, while I get it out, it's basically just you go into your Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server resource, as I was mentioning, and then in the monitoring section, we do have a section for that. So let me see if I have one, but if not, I'll add links in the chat as well that we can go through. So yeah, I'll do that. I'll put it in the chat instead, Arnav, so folks can take a look.
All right, sounds good. And we do have one quick question from Pablo, which is, will least privilege apply to the best practices assessment?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for the different features, it is also going to be there, but one of the things to keep in mind is that least privileges will be enabled right for that. So let me put in a link, actually. I think that will help answer your question. And do take a look at this and let me know if you have any more questions. Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. And I think we have one more question about the Azure Arc Gateway. So just for everyone's awareness, we are going to do a deep dive. The next session in May is going to be really a deep dive on the Azure Arc Gateway. So we'll have my colleague Jalen, who's going to do a focus session on that. So you'll learn all about Gateway and all about the networking focus there. And that will talk through the star blob core windows.net requirement, Natalia, that you surfaced as well. All right. With that, I will hand it to Swati as well as Gurkrit. And so I'm going to do screen share for y'all. And if you prefer, you can take screen share as well. And I'll let you go ahead and share the latest and greatest from the change tracking inventory, as well as update manager side. Awesome. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Arnav. Hello, everyone. I'm Swati Devgan. I'm a product manager within Azure Hybrid Cloud Management portfolio, which is nothing but a bunch of management services which help customers to manage their cloud and on-prem infrastructure. I particularly look at Azure Change Tracking and Inventory Service. Arnav, can you switch to the next slide? All right. Yeah. So the service specifically helps in tracking changes across virtual machines, both Azure and Arc virtual machines, with an aim to help you pinpoint operational and environmental issues. It largely caters to the user scenario of configuration management. More specifically, the service currently helps you to track changes and access detailed logs for the following listed data types on the virtual machines that are configured with the service. The currently supported data types would be Windows software, Linux software, Windows and Linux files, Windows registry keys, Windows services, and Linux daemons. Specifically for the Windows and Linux files, a next level of detail is also something that can be tracked with the help of the service would be delving into the details of file content as well, which is where a customer, if once file content changes are configured with change tracking and inventory for specific set of virtual machines, what a customer is empowered to do is to actually assess as to what all changes happened at the finest level of details within the file content and who was the owner or administrator who made those changes. So largely speaking, this particular service acts as a scanner and helps you to identify any changes that have happened with an aim to do any audit or governance related use cases. The service has existed for about 2.5, 3 years now. Specifically speaking about the latest developments pertaining to the service was dependent on a data collection agent. Earlier, we were leveraging the well-known log analytics agent, which is set to retire this year because it was susceptible to certain security concerns. As part of various other solutions that were dependent on this agent, which is now getting replaced with Azure Monitoring Agent, popularly known as AMA. We've also undergone the transition to revamp our service and support the same functionality, same capability with the newer and more secure agent. So in the last 6 to 10 months, we've been actively involved in providing a GA version of the same service, which is supported with the data collection agent, that is AMA. With this transition, a lot of things have improved when it comes to the usage with the service. The management of This service has simplified. Earlier with Log Analytics agent, the agent further got divided into two agents corresponding to the different OS versions. That is, for Windows it was MMA, and for Linux it was OMS. Now there would be one singular agent that will be playing the role of the data collection for the service. The security and performance for sure has enhanced. We've taken care of all the security concerns that were surfaced in the previous version of the service. And the last but not the least would be the single monitoring experience, whereby the customer does not need to manage the data stream from two separate agents. It is going to be one single unanimous agent, and all the customer has to focus on is maintaining the configuration of change tracking for a particular virtual machine, making sure that it is linked to a correct log analytic workspace. Talking about the experience over here, the customers can configure change tracking and inventory for the right set of virtual machines from Azure portal, from a specific virtual machine listing blade in itself. There's a capability on the top right of the virtual machines blade, that is services, and as you drop down, there is a capability, there is a listing called as change tracking or inventory. Both the buttons basically serve the same purpose, and once you've configured the change tracking, onboarded to this particular capability, here is a small snapshot of how the experience is rendered, which is both tabular in the form of graphical representation, rendering data of what all changes that have happened. The time range that can be configured by the customers ranges right from 30 minutes to about 30 days. And if the customer wants to
Lucas.
Wants to deep dive,
Dan.
I think there's some background.
¿Te lo dejo aquí o?
One second. Let me quickly. I hope everyone's muted. If you were not the speaker, thank you.
All right. I'll continue. So thank you, Arnav. So basically, if the customer intends to get into the second layer of depth in terms of actually accessing the logs or inventory corresponding to the configured data types, the linked log analytic workspace, which is configured as part of the onboarding experience, comes in handy. That basically acts as a host to where the customers can go and access those logs for the corresponding log analytic workspace. I'll move to the next slide. All right. So as part of the revamp that I've been talking about, where change tracking inventory with AMA is something that is existing in the GA state for about 6 months now, we have also rendered some improved experience. We've taken into account the customer feedback pertaining to the V1 version of the service and incorporated various other capabilities as well. For example, as part of the V1 solution, which was supported with the LA agent, there was a hard prerequisite for the customers to configure an automation account in order to use the capability of change tracking. That dependence does not exist anymore. This has vastly reduced the number of steps within the onboarding experience as well. As of today, if you are wanting to configure change tracking and inventory with AMA, all you need to do is go on your virtual machines page in the portal. From the services drop down, select change tracking, and you'll be rendered a form in the form of a blade where you have to just pick up a log analytic workspace, which is going to be the host for all the logs and inventory data going forward. Second great value add as part of this revamped version is shifting to the concept of DCRs, which is nothing but data collection rules. Simply put, earlier in the V1 version, all the configuration that a customer was configuring for various data types, for example, for Windows services, a customer is setting the configuration to collect data or changes at 10 minutes of frequency. If that configuration is set for a particular workspace, it will be applicable in a blanket manner on all the virtual machines which are associated to that LA workspace. So the scope of autonomy or control at an LA workspace level used to get limited, whereas now with this capability, a single LA workspace can be linked to multiple DCRs or data collection rules, and the configuration of controlling the and the configuration for various data types can be controlled at DCR level, thus rendering a lot of autonomy to manage the configuration and have different set of virtual machines with different set of rules within a single LA workspace from customer point of view. The third value add that we offer for the revamped version of the service is at-scale onboarding experience using policies. Today, we have 3 different initiatives which help you to onboard at scale at a resource group level for Azure virtual machines, Arc virtual machines, and virtual machine scale sets. Again, a capability that can accelerate your onboarding experience from the adoption point of view for this service. And of course, the last one is the usage of a singular agent. In the V1 version, the customers were required to manage 2 different agents corresponding to the 2 different OS versions. Now there's a singular agent, that is Azure Monitoring Agent. I'll move to the next slide. All right, and this essentially represents the 2 value adds that I spoke about. If you see, for the greater autonomy, the greater autonomy in terms of controlling the various configuration across a lot of virtual machines within a workspace. Earlier, there was no capability. All the rules or configuration remained the same within a singular workspace. Whereas now, with the changed experience, these are screenshots from the Azure portal with the improved capability with the V2 with the CT change tracking inventory AMA service. Now enables you to select a particular data collection rule for which the set of configuration across every data type could vary, and hence this renders greater level of autonomy to manage the various configuration across different set of virtual machines while keeping it linked to a singular LA workspace. The third screenshot that's represented in this slide basically elucidates towards the 3 initiatives that we now have, which enable you to onboard the service to various different set of workloads that are supported with change tracking as of now. That is Azure virtual machines, Arc virtual machines, and virtual machine scale sets using the 3 initiatives. Talking about the developments that are happening at present, we are actively tracking our progress to migrate the workloads that exist on change tracking and inventory with LA Agent. That is the retired version. Log Analytics Agent will completely retire by 31st August 2024. Hence, as a service which is dependent on this legacy agent, which is set to retire, we are actively tracking our progress to migrate the customers from the V1 to the V2 version of the service. We have a migration guidance in place as well for the customers to migrate both Arc and Azure workloads to the AMA version of the service. After my presentation, I'll send the links to all these documentation and guidance in chat as well. Yeah, so that's about it. I'll take a pause and see if anyone wants to ask any questions. Otherwise, over to you, Gurkeet.
Awesome. And I know we do have a little bit of time. I'm not sure, Swati, if you want to show this in action. If you have an Azure portal where you could open it up. I know you have some snippets that you had in the slides. And feel free to take the screen share.
I think I'll as I said, I'll share the documentation and the guidance for the same. And if anyone has any particular questions specifically related to the experience part of things, they can write to me particularly on Teams as well. Otherwise, I'm good with the sharing of the documentation.
All right. If there's any questions, then in the chat, we can monitor. And I think there's some asks for the documentation. They're asking for, does the change tracking for registry capture previous and new values, who changed, etc.? And do we still need to create a DCR for inventory manually? So those are 2 questions that are in the chat.
So for inventory the DCR essentially remains same for both the the tracking changes part and inventory. So that experience in terms of creating the DCR manually doesn't differ when it comes to tracking the changes or specifically for inventory. However, now talking about the methodologies or ways that we have to create DCRs, there is one that there is a capability to create a DCR via portal in itself, which is well documented as well, and I'll link it here right after the call. And what was the second question? All right. Is change tracking inventory complementary if Windows ESU are consumed? That's correct.
Yes.
That's the case. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'll let you monitor the chat if there's any other questions. Thank you again,
Sure.
Swati. And then over to you, Gurkrit, with Update Manager.
Thanks, Arnav. So hi, everybody. I am part of the hybrid management team as well. And I am one of the product managers building Azure Update Manager. And what is planned for today is to provide an overview of this service, which has gone GA in September last year. And over the last 8 months, we have observed a lot of inputs. We have received a lot of feedback from our users. And on the basis of that, we have planned for today's narrative. And I hope it's going to help all of you. So basically, Azure Update Manager is one of the management services that Azure provides. And it's one of the top services which is getting used via Azure Arc. And what we have done over here is that it's a service which allows our users to manage updates for their Windows and Linux servers and for many other Azure resources as well. When I talk about Azure resources, these resources are like SQL virtual machines that we have, SQL workloads, we have Azure Stack, HCI, we have Windows, Internet of Things. So to sum it up, it allows our users to patch their servers on the basis of operating systems like Windows and Linux and multiple other resources that we have offered by Azure. And in the near future, we are going to be enabling patching for third-party applications as well, so that it is going to be a holistic solution for our users for all their patching needs. What we have observed is that there are common patching operations that we have for all kind of resources. And we have acknowledged those common operations, and that is the backbone of our service. So first, what we have observed is most of our users, they wanted to have a single pane of glass. So Azure Update Manager provides that. So it is a one-stop shop which enables our user to look at their entire IT state, entire group of resources they have, and they can look at the compliance state or the update status for all their resources from a single dashboard using Azure Update Manager. And it allows our users to monitor using this single pane of glass across the globe as well. By that, what I mean to say is that this resource has a global availability. It's available in all the regions where we have Azure Compute available, and also in all the regions where we have Arc-enabled regions. So that is one of the common themes that we have. And the second common theme or the operation that we have is we wanted to have a lot of operations which are automated. By that, what I mean is that using Azure Update Manager, users can automate the assessment of their resources. So by enabling that particular operation, periodically the system checks that, let's say, in a running window of 24 hours, which resources have some updates which are pending, and then they can initiate those actions accordingly. It allows our users to have some customized actions as well. For example, they can have their own customized maintenance schedules, and in those particular schedules, they can pick a particular time window, they can have specific sequencing achieved, and then they can initiate their operations. And then we have some advanced features like hot patching offered as well. And in near future, we are aiming to provide a further set of advanced features, like we want to make sure that we have patch control, patch baselining. We want to make sure that our workloads are getting patched while there is a ring awareness or the sequencing of our resources is there. For example, in the context of SQL workloads, we have something called availability groups or we have clusters. So we want to reach a state in near future where our patching operations are aware of the context. So those kind of advanced capabilities are going to be there in the future. And last is uh, the actions are comprehensive irrespective of the kind of setup our users have. For example, they can be native users in Azure. They can be having a mix of private cloud along with other clouds as well. But if Azure Update Manager is getting used, it acts as a comprehensive one-stop shop to monitor the entire landscape. So another important thing to note is Azure Update Manager is a software as a service. It's a native service that we have. There are no onboarding steps required. I'll give you a small demo that how easy it is for us to get started. That's a brief overview of Azure Update Manager. With that, we can jump to the next slide, Arnav. Perfect. So on this slide, what I am trying to convey is one of the top scenarios that we have been hearing from our Arc users. So what we have observed is most of our Arc users, they are also using System Center on-prem. Now, System Center, we understand, is one of the box products that Microsoft offers, and it has multiple capabilities in it, right? And as our users are trying to modernize, and as part of their modernization journey, either they prefer to migrate to Azure or they prefer to Arc-enable so that they can start using the Azure platform capabilities while their resources are still on-prem. And as part of this journey, what we have seen is that our customers, our users, or all the developers that we have, at times they struggle to understand how to map the existing solutions like System Center that they have already in place. And in the gamut of things where we have multiple services available in Azure, how to pinpoint to the set of services which allows them to achieve equivalent service at par with System Center. So this slide is a visual representation of the multiple modules we have in System Center. And in the bubbles, there are multiple services which are called out. For example, if you look at the config capability of System Center, which is particularly the System Center configuration module, if you want to achieve equivalent capability in Azure, then group of services come together. For example, Swati briefly spoke about change tracking and inventory, and I'm talking about Azure Update Manager. Likewise, we have few more services. So these group of services come together for us to achieve the capability of these modules that we have in System Center. So likewise, there are multiple services that allow us to achieve parity, and that we have found to be a helpful starting point for most of our users. On the next slide, we have a brief list of top questions that we have been getting from our users. What we have seen is that broadly our users, as they're exploring Azure services, primarily let's say solutions like change tracking and inventory and Azure Update Manager, either via Arc or if they are migrating to Azure, uh, there are certain questions, certain repetitive themes which are emerging, and I'll briefly walk you all through that. What we have seen is that for a hybrid state where let's say our users are having their servers, machine, or let's say IT infra present both in Azure and on-prem, at times they want to understand that, hey, what set of Azure management services should we be using? So which means there's a problem of plenty. There are so many services that we have in Azure. And for them to have a quick start, they want to understand what services are going to be there, which they need to be targeting for. That is what I just showcased on the previous slide. And second is our users are interested at times to understand what we recommend as the management baseline for Arc-enabled servers. So for all the top scenarios that we have, what is our recommendation? So we do provide that kind of visibility in our public documentation. And last is a set of questions where we have found that our users at times get confused. They feel that Arc is a replacement for solutions like System Center, which is not the case. System Center, we need to understand in a way, is a bridge, a technology which allows us to extend the capabilities of Azure to on-prem. And then other themes are customers, users, again, like I called out, even developers, at times they want to understand, are there any prerequisites that we have for them to start using Azure services via Arc? What kind of prerequisites we have? And then everything else is around the kind of benefits they can expect. For example, what is going to be the total cost of operation, specific pricing for most of these services. So all these things are addressed specifically in our public documentation. Then likewise, for specific scenarios where customers want to, let's say, migrate to Azure, and they don't want to use Arc, there are some common questions that we have. Again, something similar that, hey, if you're migrating, what is going to be our total cost of operation? What is going to happen to our existing licenses that we have while we are going to, let's say, be in the transition phase? We will be having system center kind of product being used on-prem where where a license is there, and in parallel we will be consuming some services on Azure. How the dual pricing will come into picture. So there are some scenarios how to approach it, and that information is also available. And last is, at times our users want to understand, do they need to get off or walk away from their licenses, and what kind of complication they are going to get into. So those kind of things are also addressed. And last is, at times our users want to understand that, hey, is there going to be any kind of deployment complexity involved? So most of these questions are addressed. But again, easy answers are most of these services are native services. There are no explicit onboarding or deployments required, and it's easy to consume. I'll just pause. I'll check if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'll take over and walk you through Azure Update Manager in Azure Portal.
Awesome, thanks. And looking forward to the demo. Seems like, in the community, we're not just coming with the answers, we're coming with the questions as well for folks. So, so love the kind of exploratory thinking there. Great. Feel free to take over. I've stopped screen share if you want to demo Update Manager in action.
Perfect. I see that there's some questions in the chat. Let me answer those questions later, but let me use the time on hand to demonstrate. Okay. First, let me quickly also touch one of the previous points that you raised, Arnav. I understand most of our users might be interested in our services like change tracking inventory. Let me at least guide our users to the starting point from where they can start exploring and fiddling with our service. So what I've done over here is I have opened a virtual machine, and in the virtual machine in our menu, we have operations, and in operations, we have our change tracking and inventory service available. Like I'm hovering on the inventory blade, and then we have change tracking blade right next to it. So just want to talk about the starting point that can be used by users. Okay, with that, let me dive deep for my demo around Azure Update Manager. So how we can find this service is, like I called out, it's a SaaS service. We just need to come to our search blade. We need to type search for the service. We will simply land over here. And for our users who have enabled Arc, once it's enabled, there are no extra steps required. And how it's going to play out is, if you have enabled Arc and you are using your portal, you come to this service, you will see this overview, which is the landing page or the master dashboard that we have. For all your selected subscriptions, you will see a summary of the entire estate that you have. For example, for the set of subscriptions that I've selected, there are total 1,275 machines that we have. It gives me a bifurcation of the Azure virtual machines and specifically the Arc-enabled machines. So that kind of summary is available in this ribbon. And in future, when more sources are going to be there, you will see that those snippets of information is also going to be there. Then we have some slices and dices, which allows us to understand what is the update status of our machines. For example, the first card talks about, hey, there are 26 machines where there are some updates which are pending. There are 4 machines where a rebooting is pending, so on and so forth. Likewise, we can also try to understand, out of all the machines that we have, what are the orchestration modes we are using. Let me not dive deep into the orchestration modes straight away, but these kind of key insights are also available. Then likewise, we have bifurcations available by the operating systems. For example, if I want to understand what is the compliance state for our Windows machines, then we have separate snippets for that, and likewise for Linux. And let's say if I want to have a look at how I can start some key operations, then what I've done is I have, let's say, jumped to the machines blade. Current table of content is what we have as of today. Definitely, as we are going to add more resources, you will see some changes, but the fundamentals are going to remain the same. You will let's say in the near future see something like resources. Now within that resources drop down, you will have multiple resource types. For example, machines. Then you will have, let's say, Azure Stack HCI clubbed under that, but that is going to be intuitive. But for the purposes of this discussion, let's say I am on the machines blade. I see set of all the machines listed over here. What at times is of interest is I want to understand what is going to be the type of my machine. Then I can, let's say, select only Arc-enabled servers. Uh, and within that, if I have an interest to understand, hey, what kind of workload I'm using. For example, I briefly spoke about currently we do support SQL as a workload. For that, in the Arc-enabled servers, I want to understand on top of these servers, if I have the SQL workload, I can filter by that. And likewise, other additional set of information is also available. For example, if I have ESUs available, it's enabled or not. That's briefly about how we can filter down to the kind of resources we're interested in. Otherwise, this is the at scale view. We can initiate our operations at scale. We can select multiple machines over here and we can initiate our operations. Okay, now what are the common operations we have? Let's say I have selected one of the machines, and for this machine, we have enabled something called periodic assessment. What it does is automatically it will display that, hey, for this machine, there is one update pending. For most of other machines, you will see that there is no update data available because these machines don't have the periodic assessment enabled. So these kind of capabilities are there. So this allows us to have a right starting point already summarized for us on the basis of automate periodic assessments. Next is what set of operations I can perform. For example, let's say I have selected this machine and I want to perform operation for one machine at this point of time. So what I can do is I can say that, hey, check for updates. Now what it means is that, let's say for this machine, I see that I have one pending update, but this information might be dated. But if I want to be assured that at this point in time, when I'm about to perform patching, are there any updates which are available beyond one listed here? Then I can click on this button, check for updates, and it will give me the latest status. The next operation is one-time update, which means it's a manual control. I'm taking control of things manually. I want to perform patching on this machine for the available update using a manual action. And then I have one-time update. Then next operation is giving me the capability to schedule things, to automate things. And that is where, let's say, if I dive deep into it, I will be able to create a maintenance configuration. What it does is it allows me to select set of subscriptions, resources, give a name to the configuration. It has advanced capabilities like I can use the tags which are used for most of the virtual machines. Then using tags, I can bring out multiple resources and I can attach those resources to this maintenance configuration. Then there are scenarios like we can have exclusions and inclusions of the updates. For example, using the KBIDs or using the classification types. For example, if I just want to perform operations for critical or security updates, then I can control that. And if, let's say, we want to create some customized schedules, then we can also have the provision to pick a particular window. For example, I'm creating a schedule over here. I have provision given to me that, hey, I can pick a particular time window within which we can perform this operation. And we can also have kind of flexibility to initiate such operations in relation to a particular event. For example, for Microsoft, we have something called Patch Tuesdays, where, let's say, on a Patch Tuesday, when most of the updates are released, then in relation to that particular Tuesday, if I want to perform an operation, let's say with a lag of a week or 2 weeks, then I can use this kind of capability over here. So in interest of time, I think that is all that I can showcase. But this is an overview of all the general top level operations that we have. And these operations are common across resource types. But if we get into a particular resource, then there are some other nuances that we have, and they are very intuitive. As you are navigating through the UI, you will be guided across all those experiences.
Awesome.
Over to you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it looks like there's a bunch of questions in the chat. So I'm not sure if you're able to hang around and answer the questions in the chat. I guess what we can do is we can conclude the call and perhaps async. You can respond to the questions in the chat if that sounds good.
Perfect. That works well. I'll try to close all these questions in next few minutes. But yes, we can
Awesome.
conclude the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I know it's quite late. Thanks everyone for joining the community call. And just heads up, our May call is going to be a deep dive on networking with the Arc Gateway and a lot of the extension troubleshooting recommendations that we have as well. So that's what's coming up for the next call in May. And the subsequent call in June, we're going to do a Windows Server deep dive with all of their capabilities as well as their paygo. So a lot of exciting work ahead for the next community calls. And please keep the questions coming. Thanks.